worked with me on Gabe worked with me on Home Town Takeover. I had him out there as our second
Okay.
unit.
So you were, what was the town in Mississippi?
I was in Alabama. It's called
Alabama.
Wetumpka. Yeah, Wetumpka, Alabama. It's like 45 minutes outside of Montgomery.
Yeah, it was an interesting concept, and we'll talk about that. I'm sure everybody will want to know about it. It was a huge hit. I mean, I think, what did you guys do? Like a 6 million viewers for the
6.5 million. Yeah,
6.5 million. That's insane for a reality show. That's just
yeah.
insane. So let's get started here. Welcome everybody to DC Buzz. Joining me tonight is AJ Blizzard, who's an old friend of mine, who is a up and coming. I like to say up and coming because you're still a young man, my friend. Up and coming DP and director in Atlanta area. And so welcome, AJ.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yep. So we're going to talk a little bit tonight, and it's mostly going to be me asking you questions and kind of getting your perspective. Now, you were a Full Sail graduate, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yep.
I did the back then. I think I graduated 2010. I did the entertainment business degree, which was great for me because I get to learn more of the business side of things and contracts and copyrights and kind of got a feel for business overall. Because at the time I was doing some indie films and stuff and getting hands-on experience. So combining those two was perfect for my path.
Yeah, that's great. And so we first worked together, what, in about 2008, 2009? When did we do Swamp Men?
I think it was 2000. I think it was right when I graduated. So it must have been 2000. Maybe it was 2009. Yeah.
2009. Yeah. So it's hard to believe it's been that long ago, you know. You know, right after that, you really started shooting. And I still remember when you got your first camera. You bought your first camera. So can you tell us about that transition of getting out of school, kind of what you went through, and you know, was it easy for you to find jobs? Was it hard for you to find jobs?
It was pretty quick. Little different story. I'll try to keep it short, but I kind of got lucky with the people that I was surrounded by at that time when I graduated, and the transition happened pretty quickly because I came down to Full Sail and walked for the graduation to meet all the other students I worked with online. Spent the weekend in Tampa, Florida, which is where my stepmother-in-law lived. My wife's family is really good friends with Jack Hanna and his family, so my mother-in-law said, "Hey, do you want to go tour this production company? They're the ones that do Jack Hanna's Into the Wild show for Nat Geo Wild." And I was like, "Absolutely, let's do it." I went there. What was supposed to be a 30-minute walkthrough turned into about a 3.5 hour chat between me and the staff production manager, who by the time I left said, "Hey, we've got a position on a show called Swamp Men down in the Everglades. We'll be down there for about 3.5 weeks. We need a production assistant." So I called my wife. I said, "This could be the chance to get my foot in the door. Should I do it?" You know, at the time I had a full-time job in Atlanta with great benefits. I was a logistics supervisor, making decent money for an 18-year-old. And she's like, "Yeah, go for it. It's your dream." Went down, had a blast. That's where I met you. That's where I met Gabe, Matt, like all the good guys. Just had the time of my life down there. So came back. That production company ended up offering me a full-time production coordinator position, which was great. I did that for a year, get to learn about production, the big picture, and get my hands in budgets, booking crew, doing small projects like Busch Gardens and stuff, and decided to go freelance and went freelance as a camera assistant. And shortly after that, started BCamming and working my way up as a BCam all the way up to DP. It happened pretty quick. I've been very lucky, very fortunate to meet some really good people as yourself and mentors that helped me, get my foot in the door and stay busy and work up pretty quick.
Yeah, you had a pretty stellar group of people that you worked with when
Oh
on
yeah.
Swamp Men. I mean, that was like, you know, I picked the best camera guys I knew, and so we had a really great crew of people, and it was just such a fun show to do. Hot and sweaty and in the middle of the swamp, and you know, but it was a great. And so, you know, those guys, you know, I've worked with most of those guys for over the years, and they're still the guys that you see. You know, they're still really, really busy. They're all out there doing. But now, you know, you're in Atlanta right now. You're just north of Atlanta, correct?
Yeah, about 45 minutes north of Atlanta.
And so the business has really taken off there in the last several years, with the
Oh
new
yeah.
tax incentive and tax credit and stuff that they started doing. I tell people all the time, 7 years ago, they had the same production budget that Orlando had. I think last year they did what, $5.6 billion or some crazy number like that in Atlanta. And, Orlando's still 100 million, we were just, because we have no tax credit and no tax incentive. So they did it right. So that brought a lot of production into Atlanta. So you probably saw a really uptick in production in Atlanta.
Yeah, huge growth, and it grew pretty quick. We didn't quite have the infrastructure to support it, so a lot of people moved in from North Carolina, New Orleans, LA, New York. I've got friends knew and talked to that lived way out in LA that moved here to Atlanta to relocate because the industry just grew so fast once our tax incentives kicked in, to the point to where everybody was coming in, and even those working their way up got moved up pretty quickly because we didn't have the support for the amount of growth that was happening. It's I kind of missed out on some of it because back when that started, Christina and I, my wife, she was the production manager. We were still doing shows that had us traveling. So by the time we kind of came back and settled and decided to have kids, we're like, whoa, what happened here in Atlanta? Everything's huge now. And so many different, new people. And so we went from a small network of guys that we used to work with, the 8 of us that called each other, to now having hundreds of people that were
Yeah,
looking for work and staying busy.
it's pretty crazy. So let's talk about that because that's a really interesting thing. So, the when you first start out, especially when you're starting out and you get offered these jobs on shows that are 3 to 4 months long or longer, then it's really easy to want to go out and do that. That's tough when you're married, but you were lucky because your wife traveled with you. You guys did shows together. But,
Yeah.
my wife is constantly kidding me. We've been married almost 35 years, and she's like, you've been gone half of our marriage,
Yeah.
on the road and shows. And so that's great. I love doing that stuff. But at some point it was, you want to come home and have settle down and, like you said, have kids and stuff. So was that a hard transition for you to make? Because I'm sure you were still getting calls to go back out on the road.
I'm still making that transition, honestly. And yes, it has been hard. Yeah, I got a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I miss them to death when I'm on the road. I mean, when I did Hometown Takeover out in Wetumpka, I mean, you're talking 5 months. I'm trying to drive back home on the weekends and spend time with the kiddos and then get back out there and shoot for another 3, 4 days and come back the next weekend. It gets exhausting, but it's important to find that, work and home life balance and try to be as good a dad as also try to be a good DP and follow that dream and then, do what I need to be doing at home. It's definitely been probably the hardest part recently.
That
And
life work balance. Yeah,
oh
that's
yeah.
always a tough one. Well, they
Oh,
call that the glamour of television, right?
yeah, yeah. But you're right though. Christina being a production manager has helped kind of uh, find solutions in some of these situations I get into. We're trying to find that balance because she understands the industry. So it's great that I can call her or I'll come home from set and just to look at my face, she can tell. And like, do you want to vent about it? Like, how was your day? So it's good that she knows and she knows the production world and kind of if I can't call her on lunch or FaceTime the kids on lunch, she's like, oh, he's having a busy day.
Yeah.
Uh, it's good that she gets that. It definitely helps.
So the other end of that, obviously, then too, is being a freelancer versus having your own production company.
Mhm.
And so people used to say to me all the time, "Man, you're the busiest freelancer I've ever seen in my life." And I was like, "Well, I have a production company. I'm just freelancing through that production company."
Yes.
And so a lot of people don't understand that, but I think it's really important if you're a freelancer that you're not just. I know people, like Richie Benalis, who's one of the best camera guys out there who's done everything, but he has Richie Benalis, he's a freelance camera guy. I have and Randy Schaefer, another, just like incredible camera guy, but it's just Randy Schaefer. He's a camera guy. I was always approached it more like I'm a production company and I can do I can produce, I can direct, I can shoot, we can set up the shoots for you, we can hire the crews, we can do the post-production, anything you want. So how does that work for you? Where do you fall on that side of the fence?
It's my wife and I. We own a production company. We started it with the intention of doing kind of smaller projects, working our way up from there. I was like, hey, when we're not doing long term shows, reality shows, and out of town, we can focus here locally and doing small business videos and stuff like that. Now, finding the time to do that and really pursue that to the point where I need it to be to grow into a substantial business has been hard because it's, if I go out on a show for 3 or 4 months, by the time I come back, even here locally where I live, 45 minutes north of Atlanta, there's new businesses and new production companies coming in, especially with the growth around Atlanta. There's several small video marketing businesses that have sparked up here, even in my town, to compete with. So it's kind of hard to focus on that part of it. But the upside is being an LLC, or we just became an S corp actually. Being able to pay myself through payroll and deal with the taxes a certain way. When I rent gear, if I rent gear on a show that I'm not on, that all goes to the business. So it's been good to have a business structure, opposed to just
Right.
setting out on myself or
Yeah.
or out on my own.
Yeah, for me, it was just a good way not to be taxed twice on a lot of it.
Yes.
So that's
Yeah.
that's everything went through the business, and so I always approached it that way. But it was, whenever I presented myself to somebody, I was always, Randy Baker Productions or Digital Storytellers, and then I think that came from just working for a lot of production companies over the years. Now, what about let's talk about owning equipment. Because, as I always say, once you get that gear monkey on your back, it's kind of hard to get that gear monkey off, you know.
Yes.
And so talk to me about that. I remember you got your first camera and then like very shortly after that, it was stolen. What
Yeah.
was that like?
I learned that lesson the hard way early on. It was good that I learned that lesson so early on. My very first B cam job that I got offered, it was a show where they hired owner operators. And again, it was just another leap of faith. I just took that risk and said, hey, just buy the camera. It was used. It was the HDX 900, with the Fuji 4.5 lens. I love that lens. I love that camera ergonomically. It's still probably my favorite as far as fitting on the shoulder right and being able to balance it and stuff. But that was my very first investment. I took that job, bought the camera, and I guess I was a decent enough shooter that they kept me around the rest of the season. So that, the camera ended up after 2 seasons paying for itself, and then it actually helped me pay for a lot of my school loans. But yeah, early on in that season, probably 3 or 4 months after I bought the camera, it was my wife and I were out doing a B-roll day. So our location that day was the production van. So we had all our gear in the production van. And we had pulled over at a restaurant in Atlanta, and we were going to ask them permission to shoot a time lapse off their balcony while we eat. I was like, well, instead of taking all the gear in now and setting it up, and then, I'd rather ask permission first. Let's go in and just ask them. We went in to ask him, came out, side of the production van was open, and all the gear was gone. The camera, the tripod, the batteries. And I was devastated. I was so desperately looking for the camera that I was looking under the seat. That's how bad I was dealing with that.
Yeah, once you go through that once, that's your heart just is crushed. I've had stuff stolen out of vans before, cameras and stuff. And unfortunately, I was in San Diego shooting one time, and they took 2 sets of cameras and all the tapes that we'd shot for the week. We packed everything up. We were getting ready to fly out. We thought we'll stop and have lunch before we fly out. And we had lunch, and somebody obviously followed us from the hotel. So yeah, that's a heart-wrenching thing. So
we were followed. That's what our detective said. They pulled the footage from the restaurant, and you could see the car pull up next to us, and they backed out where you couldn't see the license plate. And it was 2 guys working in the team. One was watching, the other was pulling the stuff out. It's just, it kind of opened my eyes to that side of the world, because I'm a nice guy. I like to talk to people, especially if I'm out downtown shooting B-roll. Like, yeah, this is what we're shooting. It's a lot of fun. And, now I got my guard up a little bit more now, just knowing that they work in teams, and that, especially if a lot of production's going on, a lot of people are targeted the gear. We found my camera for sale on eBay. Actually, my wife found it on eBay, and we got it back.
Oh, that's great. That's really cool. Yeah, usually a lot of those rings will buy them, and then they go right to Miami, and they go to South America. So there's
ours was sold to, believe it or not, sold to Adorama's used department, and their used store on eBay is where we found the camera.
Yeah. And there's actually a camera site online that you can register your camera if it's stolen, and they will check all the major companies, B&H, Adorama, Sammy's, all those guys who buy used equipment. And if that serial number pops up, then they contact you. So it's pretty cool. So let's talk. Do you own a lot of cameras now?
So I do now. Yeah, I've got. I went from the HGTV 900 to the F5, and then from the F5 I bought 2 FS7s, and then I have 2 FS7s I'm trying to get rid of now. Now I have 3 FX9s, and A7S, and a bunch of other like smaller stuff to work with the gimbal and all that kind of stuff. But
Like I said, once you get that equipment monkey on your back, it's kind of
yeah,
hard to get it off of. And so, yeah, and so let's talk about that, because a lot of our students, they come out of our degree program with their own camera, but I'm always talking to them about, well, you need to buy gear that's going to be a return on investment. Just don't
yeah,
go out and buy the latest gear to buy the latest gear. I have closets full of that gear. I'm the poster boy for doing that. Don't do that.
yeah,
So buy gear that if you can't pay for it in 6 months, don't buy it.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
that simple. It's got to be a return on investment. But you know there's a lot of gear that makes your job easier to do, and that's how I always approached it. And I think that was why I was in a big way so successful on a lot of the stuff that I did, that I had all this great ancillary gear that I could work with other people's cameras and bring that gear in and make my job easier and make their job better and stuff. And so I charged them minimally for that stuff. It was like a kit fee, and that was about it. But it gave them tremendous, flexibility then. And so they kept hiring me. They're like, hey, hire this guy. He brings all this cool stuff with him, and it's all the latest gear and all the cool, GoPros and all the little gimbals and stuff. And so, do you have a lot of that gear that you tend to buy that makes your job easier for you?
yeah. I do, and I also know my genre, my most popular genre that I shoot in is the HGTV world, doing house reality and renovation shows. So doing so many of those, I know what those shows require and what they look for. And now that I have, actually in the last year, I bought a production van, a gear van that's got custom pull-out shelves. I pull out of the back and the side. So I organize my van to where all the camera department stuff is in the side door and all the lighting and G&Es in the back. It's a low top, so it fits in parking garages, which is great for Atlanta. But people are surprised at how much stuff I have in there, because nowadays I don't need a big HMI with a huge ballast. I can go grab the Aperture 300
Yeah.
and fit it in a little slot in the van, and it does the same thing that the old HMI used to do, that I used to lug around in the back of the truck.
Yeah.
So I've got the van with all the C stands and lights and stuff for a typical run and gun reality show. With 3 cameras that fit in the side. I got built-in battery chargers in the side of the van with a backup inverter with its own backup battery. Um, Canopies on top, so you can work in the rain and in the shade. I call it my third child.
Yeah.
That's my
I have
third.
the same thing. I have a Nissan NV 2500 that's my production van, and it's I keep all my grip gear and lighting stuff in there, my mag liners and all that stuff in there, and then I have
Yeah.
shelves for all my camera stuff. So I'm on a shoot, everything goes in, and so it makes it's much easier for me. And I mean, it makes my life so much easier, and I'm sure you feel the same way.
It does, and usually I've been losing ACs recently because everybody's been getting booked up. But to find and get an AC that's familiar with your van and your gear, as familiar with it as I am, it makes the job a lot more efficient and a lot easier. And efficiency is key for me. I'm so OCD. If you look at my gear van, everything's got a spot, everything's numbered, everything is put back exactly how it should be at the end of the day. Everything's accounted for. We do the inventory, and it beats. And I've been on a lot of shows that do this, that just go to the enterprise and rent a minivan, and I can't tell you how many times I've busted knuckles trying to get gear out from under C stands or Pelican cases. So to have the van that's organized where you can just go I get a sliding C stand wall that slides out, and you just take the C stand and you go with it, and it's
Yep.
super efficient. It's a lot quicker, makes the job easier. And same with all the other gear, the AS7 with the Ronin S, and my drone and all that stuff. Like I know where they're at, when to use them. They're so easy to get to and get out. So that's very appealing to showrunners. When showrunners call me, hey, we have this show coming up. We're here. You have a whole package. The van, the lights, the cameras,
All
your
the
drone
cameras,
supply,
everything.
anything that can help boost my appeal to showrunners is a huge plus. And then when we get there and we unload in 10 minutes and we're set up, they're like, wow, that was quick. It's like, well, yeah, because we can get to everything.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
I've got a certain way I ride with the Ronin. I don't have to break the Ronin down. I've got a thing that I use that it rides by itself freely, so it's not getting any pressure or anything. So I can pull up and out and run with it in 2 minutes and do
Yeah.
gimbal shots.
So let's talk about that for a second, because we have a lot of students who, one of the biggest questions I get as soon as they get the FS5, they're like, what kind of gimbal can I get for the FS5? And I'm like, no, don't. That's not what you want to do. What you want to do is you want to go out and buy A7S 2 or 3, or a small camera, and get a nice gimbal, and then get, because you're going to shoot a wide angle lens on that, but you can get a small zoom and put on there, and
Yeah.
then you can keep that thing entirely built and have a case for it, so it's built, and all you got to do is take it out, turn the camera on, turn the gimbal on, and you're ready to shoot. As opposed to stripping the camera down, putting it on the gimbal, balancing it out, and then shooting, and then taking the camera off, building it back up again, and putting it on a rig or a tripod.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I always say that. And for what you're going to spend on a heavy duty gimbal that will hold a FS5 or a larger camera like a FX7 or the new FX6 that's coming out, which is so light, it's unbelievable. But you need a bigger gimbal. You're going to pay more money for that. So you could buy the camera and a smaller gimbal for the same price and have it with a Pelican case for it, and you just have it all set and ready to go.
Oh, yeah.
And so do you carry a complement of like GoPros with you too?
Yeah, I've got a GoPro kit. I think now I've got 10 in there. It's for bigger, kind of bigger shows. Though I mean, the last show we just did, where we had 3 teams. I was a series DP on it, but we had 3 teams that each had a DP. And that show was so GoPro heavy as far as the scenes in the cars with the
Sure.
competitors driving around and looking at houses. We had 3 GoPros in each truck, and then we had additional GoPros for time lapses and construction and all that stuff.
Sure. Yeah. I have, two huge Pelican cases full of just mounting gear for GoPros,
Oh, yeah.
So once you get into there, you can't. And so when you're talking about doing specific types of shows now, real estate and reality shows and home fixer up shows are a very specific style of show, because there's the whole process stuff that you have to do. And so it's like there's a format. You got the drive arounds, you got the driving shots where you're going to use GoPros. You have a lot of process stuff where it's a lot of stuff that takes time, and you set up the GoPros and just do time lapse of that stuff. So walk us through kind of a typical format. I mean, you did the original Hometown.
I did Hometown Takeover.
Hometown Takeover.
Yeah.
And so walk us through that, and so tell us about that show. And and like we were talking earlier, that was such a huge monster hit for HGTV. I mean, it's just, you got 6.5 million viewers which is unheard of in a reality show. That's just, if you get a million or 2 million viewers, you're picked up for the entire season by it.
Yeah, I was surprised on the viewership we got, and they promoted the heck out of it, which was good. And then those guys were just super awesome to work with. But we had that show was a little different. It's funny story. I originally turned it down because 80% of my resume is probably HGTV, and it's very important to me in my career to stay diverse and do different genres. My true passion is wildlife and adventure shows. And so I spent last year concentrating on Animal Planet. I did a show for Nat Geo Wild, did a show for Animal Planet, I've done some Discovery stuff. Went back to HGTV, and they approached me. They asked me to do that show, and the schedule didn't really work, and I turned it down. And they came back and was like, "Well, what if we do this schedule?" And I was like, "Well, tell me more about the show." Because a lot of the HGTV shows are so formatted, you get stuck in a format, and it's important as a DP, if you want to stay diverse and be able to do different genres across the board, you can't get caught in a certain style or format. And I've seen that happen to some really close friends that do just house shows, and now they can't do anything else. So when I met the EIC of the company for that production company and the network exec were on the phone, they said, "We want this one to feel different." I was like, "Okay." I've heard that the last 2 years, ever since Discovery's bought out Scripps, and you guys want to do something a little more edgy for HGTV. I've heard it over and over, and it always gets to the edit, and then it airs, and it's the same kind of HGTV show. So they were like, "No, we really do want this one to be a little different." So we went out. I knew the showrunner. It's funny, she was actually giving my very first BCAM job 8-9 years ago. And so it's funny how our paths came back around and we met. I was like, "Hey, you're the very first story producer that told me to pick up a camera and try shooting. Here we are now, you're show running, and then I'm doing series DP." We had so much fun with that show because they kept telling us, "Netflix, think Netflix. We want the Netflix styles." Okay. And I had recently done some Netflix stuff. So we got creative with our interviews, and instead of doing a typical medium 2 shot, with a little looking room left or right, like you see on most of those shows, we did some really wide shots, lots of headroom, very symmetrical. We let what was in the background kind of help tell the story of the town of Wetumpka, and which was the town where they were renovating. So it was important for us, and I always take a psychological approach, even on the smallest reality shows. Like, how can you make the visual complement what's going on in the story? And this was a good one for that because Wetumpka was so pretty in person, on the river and the bridge and the historical downtown. There were so many different ways that we could show that in the background of interviews, to where everything just felt really good together.
Yeah,
So
the
we
show looked great. The show looked really good. Yeah.
Yeah, and what I loved about that showrunner is because I've worked with a bunch where they always want to give them a safety. Let's give them a safety. So Post has that backup. She didn't want that, and I love that about her because we would do interviews and I'd set it and it'd be wonky for HGTV, but cool to me. I'm like, this is good. She's like, I love it. I was like, do you want to give them a different angle, a tighter two shot? She said, no, give them this, make them use this. I was like, yes. So that after that first week, we just ran with it. And if we could, not every interview we could do that with, but if we could, we would find a way to, whether it was the composition and shooting or the way we framed our interviews and what we could tie into the interview space to help tell the story. We had so much fun with it. And I think visually, we've gotten a lot of good feedback. I've gotten a lot of good calls from other producers I've never met before that were, pleased with it. That was a big one for my resume, probably the biggest one for my resume in the last 10 years.
I have to tell you, I really like the way that you guys introduced, when they took the homeowners to the houses and stuff, and stuff. I love the wide shot outside where you saw over their shoulders. You never see that. I mean, you never see the backs of the talent and the house in the foreground. And usually they brought up a little, painting that she'd do or something like that. And so when I saw that, I was like, this is the way it should be. I mean, this ties the house into the story. You don't need to see their faces right now, and then you would cut around to get the reactions and stuff like that.
Yes. And that's something I'll say real quick is that for me, every show I do, if I get on as DP, in the very beginning, I say I want to be as much involved as possible as I can with the post department. Let me talk to the post soup and the post EP and make sure we're all on the same page. So that way, when me and the showrunner are setting these shots up, expecting them to use them in a different, in a certain way to really stylize this show, just make sure they have the style guide that they're referencing to. And they did a really good job of that because a lot of reality shows don't do that. You go, you shoot, you wrap, you're done. 6 months later, you see the rough cut or the air, and you're like, oh, that's a little different than what I was hoping. Well, this show, they really kept us involved, which was awesome because I took specific notes on certain dolly shots. And anytime we set up some nice stylized shots, we'd make notes to post and we'd tell them exactly the time code, where to use the shot. Because more often than not, you see in shows where you try to do a long dolly shot or a motion time lapse, they always cut it short because they just don't have time for it in the edit. And so what we made clear to this post team on this show, and the showrunner was really adamant about it, was slowing the pace down a little bit and letting some of those shots play out. The dolly shots, use just that dolly movement to let that shot play out, or the dialogue play out as they walk up to the house or as they're walking down Company Street, during the reveal. Don't cut between too many. Let that shot, make it pretty. And
let it breathe is always what I say.
Yeah.
So, and that's really interesting. I got to, kind of later in my career, I got to the point where, if somebody was wanting me to DP a show, I'd make a deals with them about, okay, so I want the editor on set for the first week, and then I want to have a weekly meeting with the editor, and they were always like, oh, we can't bring the editor out. I was like, yeah, you can get somebody else then, and then they'd always cave in, and the editors would always say the same thing to me. I've never been on the set before. I'm like, that just boggles my mind that you guys, that it's got to be a symbiotic relationship between you and post. It just has to be if you're a DP. Otherwise, what happens is that, and in the old days, they thought motion or focusing on somebody when you were trying to get a focus on somebody, they thought that made it look more dynamic. And so you would take all this care to get these nice, great shots, and then you see the edited version, and they would cut to the thing where you're setting your focus and going in, and because they thought it looked more kind of cool looking and stuff. It was used to drive me nuts. And I would call
they're always gonna use the shot when you're repositioning.
Yeah. So and so what a lot of people don't realize probably is that these shows are very formatted. I mean, you have a format for doing the shows, and so your interviews are like they have, there's different types of interviews that most people do. You can do sit and lits, what they call sit and lits, where you sit the people down, or you can do like walk and talks with people, or you can have them doing specific stuff. Like on the Hometown series, they always go back to his not on the Hometown Takeover, but on the Hometown series, they always went back to his like woodshed,
Which,
and they
yeah.
build a table or something like that. And so they always had a little dot, and that is kind of one of the things where you get them doing things, and then you talk to them. And so there are different ways of doing interviews that most people don't know about. But when you do a variety of shows, you see all kinds of different ways of doing that. I worked on a show in New York called Dream School. 50 Cent and Chucky D were executive producers on it, but it was about all these kids. And the director was this crazy, out of control director, just out of control. And he just worked on Mr. Robot. So he wanted everything, off-sided, framed, and stuff like that. And I kept saying to him, "Look, dude, this is not the show for that. That's just that. But I'll do it. I'll shoot the entire thing." We shot for 2 weeks like that, and then the executives from Sundance came in and said, "Guys, stop this. This is not Mr. Robot." So. And fortunately, I was shooting a lot of other stuff that was just normal, because I knew they were going to say that. And so when they edited together the promo, they used all my stuff that I'd shot that wasn't like that. And so we run into that all the time. So I just want to transition here into, you were talking about one thing about having problems finding ACs. So let's talk about how to get started, because you came up through the ranks the right way. You were an AC and a second camera, and then became a DP. So what's it take to be a good AC?
Hustle. It's hard to find people that hustle now. It's and thinking ahead, staying 2-3 steps ahead. Anticipation is the key. Definitely the key. Yeah, just getting familiar. When you start a show, get as familiar as possible as you can with the gear, and communicating with your cam ops and your DP, and understanding their style and their expectations. Because if you know kind of their style, if you can catch on to their style pretty quickly, you get to a point where you can kind of read their minds, and you know what they're thinking, and what's coming up next. And in certain shows, like you were saying a minute ago, that are formatted, you do a day or two of that, and you kind of know what's coming up next. So I'm like, hey, in about 10 minutes from now, we're going to be doing an OTF. Let me go ahead and get the sticks and the 4x bounce and stuff on standby, fresh battery, that kind of stuff. And so that way, when they call this scene and they go into interview, it's all out and ready for the DP to pop right in.
That was one of the great things I always loved about working with you as an AC. You were always on top of things. We never had to ask for things. Everything was always right. And that's just being proactive and doing that is a really big thing. But what about knowing the equipment? Do you expect somebody to come in, because you own a lot of your own gear, but a lot of times you'll go out and work on shows where it's a Canon or Sony Venice, or every show is a different camera for me.
Mm-hmm.
So and we'll talk a little bit about that. But what about ACs coming in? Do you give them prep time, or do you try to foster ACs that you find before you get on a show and say, hey, come and learn my package, and learn the van and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's recently I've been caught in a lot of situations where this last show I just did, we went through quite a few different ACs because everybody was floating around, getting different jobs, and then our schedule was kind of very fluid, so we were losing people and then getting new people. I guess every show is different. It depends on, when I book a gig and I know what kind of show it's going to be, I reach out to my top guys, people that already know the gear, that style of show. Because not everybody can do every genre and every style of show either. But so for instance, recently we bumped up our PA on my last show because he had a good hustle. He was more eager than the AC that we had on. You could tell he really wanted to work his way up. So a lot of times I'd rather bring in someone that, if I see that this individual has a drive and the passion and the eagerness to want to learn, and is asking questions about the camera and how to format cards and change batteries and stuff, if you notice that, and then can reward that by bringing them up and training them in a way that is efficient for you and your gear and your show, I almost rather that than having somebody on that's not a good fit for that particular show. We did that on my last show actually. We bumped up the PA and he was great.
Yeah.
He'd tell me something once, and then the next day I'd go reach for my walkie to ask for something, and I'd see him come across the yard with it, and say, "Oh, this guy's great."
Yeah. That's I always say that too. I would rather have somebody with the right attitude and a hunger than somebody who's just kind of burnt out and doing it, who's been
Yeah,
doing this for a long time, and it's like, okay, great, I'll, that's not the right attitude you have. It's and so if you get the right people, for me, it's all about crewing the right crew, because if you get the right crew, then everything flows smoothly, hopefully, and you have a fun time, and it's a fun experience. You get the wrong crew, it's not a fun experience, and we've
yes,
all been on those shoots.
it can go downhill quick, and that's my number one thing is having a great crew that jives well together and keeping it fun. I just love to keep it fun, and
Yeah.
because if you're having fun with it, your best work is gonna come out, and if you're passionate about the project and having fun with it, then you're gonna succeed. You're gonna do good with it if you really
and
care.
and I always talk about this all the time. I have a no yelling rule on my sets. Doesn't matter what my crew position is. I don't tolerate people yelling at people, or going off on people in front of other people. I have a very low tolerance for that. So I've a number of shoots I've stopped and pulled people aside and said, if you ever yell on the set again at somebody, it's either going to be you or me leaving, and I guarantee it's probably going to be you. So don't do that again, because there's no reason for that. There's absolutely no reason to yell at anybody. You should always be trying to have a great set, and everybody should be getting along, and it should be fun. If it's not fun, you're doing something wrong. You're just doing something wrong. So that's it. So let's talk a little bit about, do you have any tips for people who are wanting to get out? So most of our students, we're really kind of interesting. In the film program, everybody's probably going to break down into the camera department or directing, above the line, below the line, sets, audio, makeup, hair, and stuff like that. For us, most of our people are Renaissance filmmakers. They're coming out of here as kind of Renaissance filmmakers. They're learning how to tell narrative stories and how to shoot cinematic looking images. But they can go to work for somebody else. They can start their own company and do their own company because they have all their own gear that they need to. So what's your take on that? Do you think people should go out and work for other people for a couple of years first to get the experience and then try to go out on their own, or should they just be going for it?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to work and meet as many people as possible and work in different areas for a couple years before trying to start your own business, and kind of going the route that I did. It's when I went freelance, I had the advantage because I was previously a production coordinator, so I had tons of contacts already because I was the one calling and booking them for the shows that company did. So as soon as I went freelance, I would text everybody, you and Schaefer and Gabe, and hey, I'm freelance now. I'd love to cam assist, and I'm looking for work. And that's just started working and getting credits and doing different shows and working my way up from there. And then I had kind of already knew out of school though that the visual side that's been my passion. I mean, ever since I was a child doing films, home films, and movies growing up as kids and stuff. So I knew exactly how where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. It's just a matter of meeting the right people and putting yourself in pools of people that you can learn the most from and kind of lean on as mentors.
Yeah, that's a big thing, and we really pitch that a lot. It's all about. I'm always telling people, get a mentor. Find people who will mentor you, and get to know those people. Find the right people. Go out and find the right people that will work for you. Somebody asked a question, and so you're pretty good about this. I've been doing a lot of talking with Netflix and Amazon over the last couple of years, and about projects. But you just finished some Netflix stuff. Do you see a transition and a change in kind of production style between doing HGTV stuff versus Netflix stuff?
I see a little change. There's so many different platforms now. I mean, even Amazon Prime and Facebook Watch, and there's so many different avenues now to take to get content, and so many that need content. I've definitely see now that Discovery is so big and on so many different networks, you see a little diversity between their channels, you know, Food Network, Discovery, Animal Planet. But as far as like mixing the styles, I feel like Netflix has so much content that's all
Yeah.
different now. Uh, it's you're going to see a crossover, I think, in the way Hometown Takeover was. They want something a little more stylized, you know, sort of a little more cinematic. There, yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
it's an art.
you're already seeing that sort of with like Paramount Network and the Joanne
Yes, yeah.
and that the Magnolia Network thing that they just launched and all this stuff. So you're seeing the influence of that already beginning to happen. I think
Yeah, and I've seen
it's
that like over the last 10 years, I've seen, you know, the phase where everything was kind of slowed down, a little more cinematic, and then HGTV and some other networks really wanted to go like run and gun and very dirty and, you know, dirty singles and over the shoulder and constant movement. And now they're starting to slow it down again, a little more stylized and cinematic and breaking out the production quality with the dollies and stuff like that. So
yeah.
it's it's been
When you
interesting.
get to be my age, my friend, you've been around it for a long time. It's cyclical. There's cycles that go through, and it continually changes. And what's old is new, what's new is old, and
Yeah.
so and it really just depends on trends and stuff. So you just get used to shooting a lot of different styles, which is great for me because I never get bored. Every show is a little bit different.
Well, and the gear is a little easier to work with now too. I mean, there's so many different
Yeah.
gear has a big impact on that because what I could do with Hometown Takeover with the FS7 and certain lenses, I wouldn't have been able to do that 6, 7, 8 years ago.
Right.
So being able to add better quality and use certain lenses in these reality shows now because they're a little more affordable and I can get a nice prime kit to use on these types of shows is kind of being able to bring that into play on the reality side of TV. Um, has been a big part of that too, and being able to make those shows look better and more stylized and
Yeah.
add nice depth and stuff, you know. So gear has a huge play in that role, I think, and it will. As
Absolutely. And I talk about that all the time about how lighting has changed so dramatically over the last couple of years, and I'm a big aperture fan. I have a garage full of lighting gear that, big Kino gaffer kits and, Eric kits and stuff that I haven't touched in years.
oh yeah,
I'm just using all big LEDs now, and it's the same thing with my light panels. I have these, $1,500 light panels that sit in a box out in my garage because I never use them because I'm using a big, 300 or 500 or, the 120s. And, I've got all the modifiers you could possibly ever want, ellipsoidals and Fresnels and space lights
oh
and,
yeah. I
and
get
they
so
all
many
fit in
light
a little
tubes.
bag.
Yeah, and I was gonna say I got so many light tubes in this one little area in my van. I've got more light tubes than what a van could have fit 10 years ago, full of Aries and stuff. You know, it's definitely a game changer.
Yeah, I have a bag that's this big and a long bag, and it's got 5 light tubes in it. I'm
There you
always
go.
bringing it out. Plus, a box. Do you know about Joker boxes? Do you know Ben
Oh
Metzger
yeah.
by chance? Yeah,
Oh yeah.
I've got a Joker box full of like little, LED RGB lights that I throw up everywhere. Just in the background to give a little bit of atmosphere in the background and get a little bit of depth and so it's changed tremendously. Um, so. Anybody have any questions before we? I'm about to open it up for questions for AJ.
I got one thing I wanted to mention too.
Yeah, go ahead.
I thought was important. Because when I came out of school and even growing up as a kid making movies, I wanted to do features. I wanted to do narrative, and like many of us, got stuck in the reality world. But I can help, you know, stylize and make things more cinematic. If you know, if I get on shows that allow that. But one thing that I did, I haven't done it in about 2 years, but there was a point in my career 3 or 4 years ago that over the course of 2 to 3 years, I was going and I was doing grip work. I was a grip with a mentor of mine here in Atlanta. That was a key grip. I got bumped up to second unit DP. He was DP on Walking Dead, several other features, and he was a well-known DP here in Atlanta. Well, when he was the key grip, I used to grip for him. So in between shows, you know, when I had 3 or 4 weeks off, sometimes a month and a half off in between these 3 or 4 month runs, I'd hit him up and say, "Hey, I'm looking for work." I'd go grip on these big features, and I did stuff down at Pinewood, and I did a couple of episodics, and that experience was huge for me because I knew that I always wanted to have an upper hand on most reality shooters. that came up just in reality, from AC, B cam, and then they get caught up in that run and gun and like want to set things up quick. Well, if you can set something up quick that keeps you on time and makes your producers happy, but you can MacGyver things and do lighting a little better than the other average shooter, um, that's a huge plus. And so when I would do grip work, I'd go and grip in between reality shows to learn as much as I could about rigging and lighting and shaping light and what it did to the image. And the mentor, which we're with here in Atlanta, the key grip at that time, Sonny Lee, awesome dude. He would bring us around, introduce us to the DP on that film or show, and show us the screens and the monitors and say, this is what you did there. This is how it affected the image. This is the impact it's having. So that gave me a great experience and a great deal of knowledge because I could take that into the reality world and make things look a certain way or set things up a certain way that on set in that moment they didn't think was possible.
Yeah.
That, oh, we don't have the gear for that. We don't have the time for that. I'm like, no, give me 2 seconds. I know exactly what I can do. Double C SAN arm with the light through the silk, and like they're like, oh wow, like we never thought of that. So it's you can learn and build your knowledge as much as you want to, but you have to put that effort in. Like I didn't have to go do that between those shows, but if you want it bad enough and you want to always learn and grow in your skill and learn new techniques, there's ways to find and network with people and get into other areas of the production. I didn't just have to AC or cam up. I could go grip and learn about lighting and talk with the gaffers and some of the crew on the episodics, which was great because when we went to do indie films and feature films, then I also had a network of people that were from that world,
Yeah.
and we just have a good time together.
So we have a lot of students who are always asking how to get started in there. And of course, there are sites like Mandy's and there's Production Hub. I always send everybody to Production Hub. And, those guys are old friends of mine and, they've been around for a while. And if you for those guys out there, if you don't know about Production Hub, it's a site that you really need to look into. But I also tell people all the time, I came up, back when I came up, you had to be a lighting guy. So we were always lighting camera guys. That's how we sold ourselves, as a lighting camera guy. And I'm with you. Lighting for me is just as important as shooting. And that's why I have so many lights and so much grip equipment and stuff, because I'm like you. I know that I can go in and I can change the look of a show from what they're used to, because I bring my own gear and I have stuff that makes it easy for me to do that with. There's also, but I always tell students who are starting out, if you want to be a DP or go work for a gaffer for a while, find a lighting company and go work for them, or find a rental company and go work for the rental company, so you get to know all the gear. And when you're working for the rental company, you get to meet all the people who are coming in and renting the equipment, and
Yes.
those are the people that are going to hire you down the road. And if you're really good, and you may know this guy, Steve Campbell. Did you ever meet Steve Campbell, who was the DP on Walking Dead for a while? Really cool guy, older guy, white hair and stuff. Steve started out as the rental guy at Photo Mart right down the street from me years and years ago, and so when Photo Mart closed down and he decided he was going to go out, I was like, man, this is the best guy I've ever. And every time I went in there, he knew what he was doing. And so we started hiring him, and he went through the roof, became one of the top DPs in the country, doing all kinds of stuff. So that's what it's all about. I had a couple other questions. Did Full Sail help you? I mean, when you went out and told people, hey, I went to Full Sail as opposed to a traditional college, or
Back then, I think it helped a little. People definitely knew the name, but it's all about what you put into it. I love Full Sail and I got a lot out of Full Sail, but I could have come out of Full Sail thinking I was automatically that DP that I always wanted to be, and not willing to put in the legwork and work my way up from the bottom. And I've seen that a lot, not just from Full Sail, but at all film schools. And so that's important to know, that when you get into the industry and you start networking and getting into the world, um, collaborating and networking and working way up from the bottom, and kind of having that understanding that you're not going to go straight into it as the successful DP that you want to be. You have to work your way up to that. Full Sail definitely helped though, because it had a great recognition even back then. I think 2009, 2010, it was recognized for film and video and music and all that stuff. But it helped me when I wanted to get into the filming and doing camera stuff, because everybody knew what Full Sail was. And the quality and how they were pretty updated on the gear and what they were teaching during that time,
Yeah.
opposed
So
to local college.
I, I, that's a great thing about Full Sail. If you're in the film department, man, you get to know, the latest, and that's what they really, and just you probably don't know this yet because not a lot of people know this, but we're building a virtual stage here,
No, that's awesome.
volumetric stage. It's going to be the first school in the United States to have and it's a big stage. It's like, so we'll be doing a lot of the Mandalorian style stuff, and it's going to be pretty cool. They're spending a lot of money getting this up. Should be up by the end of the year. For a lot of our stuff, what we're doing, people coming out of our degree programs, it's growing more and more. And the school has really changed over the last 10 years a lot. And it's more, we're continually getting recognized as the top film schools in the country. And so somebody was telling me just recently they were on a show and every other person they met was a Full Sail grad, so there's a lot of us out there. But I always say to people, it's, there's good students and there's bad students, so when you come out of the school, it's not whether or not you graduated from a specific school, it's what you did in that school and how good you were and how much you applied yourself.
Yeah.
So that's it. Jonah was asking a question. He's getting ready to buy a Thanos Pro X for my FS5 Mark II. Question is, shooting with the Steadicam more popular than shoulder rigs or tripods for short films or travel shows? I could probably answer that pretty well for you. I used to be a Steadicam operator. I trained with Garrett Brown in his house in Philadelphia for a long time, and I worked on several shows as a Steadicam operator. And I just have to say, why would you ever want to become a Steadicam operator? Today it's totally different. So what most people don't realize, and this is the biggest thing that I have to deal with when we're talking with people about gimbals and Steadicams, is and I've been on shows like this. I did a show called The Mystery Files of Shelby Woo with Nickelodeon. We called it NYPD Woo because the director was a professor out of NYU, and she thought everything should be shaky cam. But they had me on the show as a Steadicam. I made them take my name off as a Steadicam because everything was shaky. We do a scene where we do this complex move, and we turn to her and say, "Okay, how was that?" She'd go, "One more time, just a little more shaky." I'm like, "I got a Steadicam on." So Steadicams are kind of old school, and there are specific shots that you would need to do a Steadicam with. But for the most part, if you have a good gimbal and you know how to use that gimbal, do the gimbal, because you don't strap the Steadicam on and then shoot all day with that Steadicam. Anytime you're doing a moving shot, you have to have a reason for doing that moving shot. You have to have a beginning, a middle, and end. It has to be motivated. You don't just go out and shoot with Steadicams. And so that's why I say to students all the time, if you want to buy a gimbal, buy a used gimbal, because what happens is all these people go out and think, I need a gimbal, and they go out and buy it, and then it sits on a shelf for 6 months, and they're like, damn, I got $1,000 wrapped up in that gimbal. I'm going to sell it. And so they sell it for $400 or $500 on eBay, and it's been used like 3 or 4 times. So there's much. And so, I'm made a living for years as a handheld camera guy. And so you put a wide angle lens on there, and those Fujis were just incredible. And I could walk with the camera and keep it almost as smooth as a Steadicam with a wide angle lens. So it really depends on what you're trying to do, with that. But what about you? Did you ever have a want or a need to get into a Steadicam kind of rig?
No, I thought about it years ago, but it was like kind of right before, all the other gimbals started coming out, the Movi and the Ronin and all that. I use those mostly. Especially if you're flying a lighter body like the 5D Mark III or whatever, that's going to get you what you need.
And you worked with us. I mean, we were in the early days of reality television. I mean, this was really the beginning of reality and there was no rigs. There were, Zacuto and, Red Rock Micro, and those guys weren't even around then, so they small HD, none of those rigs were around back then. So we made our own rigs. We made our own rigs, and we had suspension rod systems that we had and stuff. So if you're sitting around with a reality camera on your shoulder for, 12 hours a day, you need that kind of stuff. And then of course, the Easy Cam came out, those guys came out with the Easy Cam, and everybody kind of migrated to that. But there's lots of different ways to do you know, moving shots if you're doing reality, where you don't just have a camera on your shoulder all the time, you know, because that gets really old quickly.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and especially when you get to, you know, do that for 40 years like me, and then get to my age, you know, it takes me about, you know, 10 steps to get upright. Right? You know, it's like, uh, but that's it. Somebody
We
was asking if you offer if you do mentorships, or do you do internships at all in your company, or
no, I
do
was
you do internships on any of the shows that you're on, or is that through the production company usually?
it's usually through the production company. Yeah. I would love to set that up one day through my company. But yeah, possibly in the future. But I mean, outside of doing it through the company, I'm always willing to, to teach and help people out, mentor.
Yeah. So, any other questions? We've got about 6 minutes left here. Anybody else have any questions? A lot of you guys, and so what we find is a lot of people own gimbals and stuff here. And it's like, if you know, do you present yourself to others first starting? How do you present yourself to others when first starting out, aka pitch yourself? Uh,
Let's see. Well, when I took that PA position, I went in there thinking it was going to be like a 30-minute walk and talk through the production company, but I was very eager to learn and network as much as possible. So I brought my demo reel from the indies that I did in high school and to display all my indie work and camera work and stuff. And um, just if you let somebody know how passionate you are about what you want to do and show you that you're eager to learn and be professional and open-minded to different ways that different people teach, I think is the biggest thing. Just being open.
yeah.
I get stuck with a lot of people that I haven't worked with before that come on set. I'd say like half of them um, are just kind of the morale's not there. They bring the morale down. The attitude's not there. Just have a good attitude and just picture yourself as a fun person that's just wanting to work your way up. And don't be overbearing with it. I've had ACs and PAs that constantly ask to shoot or do this or do that. And it's like your time will come. Just if you work hard and you're anticipating and you're doing what you need to be doing first and being good at that, then the chance to hop in and work your way up will present itself.
Yeah, it's really just all about attitude and going in with the right attitude
Attitude's
and being eager.
huge.
Yeah.
Attitude is huge. In the hustle, it's so hard these days to find, people that have the hustle and the drive.
Yeah, I've it's over the years I've met all these really cool people, and I've hired people for different reasons. I hired a guy one time who gave me his business card, and his business card said, "My job is to make you look great." That guy went on to be the first employee of Red Cameras, and now he's I think his title is like vice president of future technology at Paramount Studios. Ted Shilowitz. And so I'm always looking for people who are just really passionate about the business and want to learn and willing to do just about anything, because this can be a hard life. That's, most people don't realize what it's like to be on a set for 4 months on a job. It's tough. I mean, you're working 10, 12-hour days. And where do you fall on that whole 10, 12-hour day thing? That's my I try not to do 12-hour days anymore.
Yeah, I usually tell them 10. If they push for 12, depends on what the gig is.
Yeah. If it's a short gig, yeah, still I try not to do it. I grew up in the commercial days where it was 8 hours,
Oh
and
yeah.
there are still people like Clint Eastwood and stuff. They work 8 hours and they go home. He wants all the crew to be home for dinner with their families.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. And the last show I did, I mean, we were on 12s, we're contract, but we worked 9-hour days. It was nice.
Yeah, that's great. And I've worked on a lot of shows that I've directed or I've produced where we tried to always make sure that we were done in 8 or 9 hours. It was rare that we went 10 hours. And if we got our stuff done and we got done early, sometimes it was 6 or 7 hours. And so because we were so on top of things, the network was like, we're cool with that. You guys are getting everything we need. So it can be a different type of set. One last question before I let you go here, AJ. Somebody was asking, what's the most helpful thing you learned at Full Sail that applied directly or helped you stand out in the real world?
I think collaborating and learn to collaborate with others, and which is good. I'm glad you asked this question because it leads me into one of the important things I wanted to mention, which was how important it is to collaborate. Because when I first started out, especially as DP, I had in my mind exactly how I wanted things to look, and I had styles that I wanted to present to people. I was like, okay, this is going to be my signature piece. This is going to set me apart from everybody else. Well, I learned real quick that there's a director on that show, there's a producer on that show, and you all got to collaborate and come to find a happy medium. um, and if it weren't for the skills that I learned from Full Sail and how to collaborate with the other students and stuff like that, and then carrying that into the real world in production, um, I think that's key. That's probably one of the most important things, just being open and willing to collaborate. Because I mean, we all want to put our look on something. And we all have ideas on how we want something to look, and we want to do the next big. We want our project to be the number one and set itself apart and look just awesome. And you have to get to a point to where you're in charge and enough to make that happen. And getting there can be a long ride. And so collaborating and being able to accommodate for others' ideas and styles is key, because I learned that really quick as an operator. It's like, oh, I think we should. I want this interview right here. I want it to look this way. And so producers, we don't have time with that. We want to do it over here just real quick. Oh, we don't need the silk. Just do it raw. I was like, okay, it's not going to look good, but I'll go with it. So I had to learn that lesson really quick.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no saying that I can't say on the Zoom meeting that we talk about on that. So yeah, that's it. Well, again, so thanks for coming out and do this. I could talk to you forever. I mean, we
I
need
was
to
going
get
to say, I wish
together
we had more
sometime.
time. So much more to
Yeah.
talk about.
Yeah. So anything else that we didn't cover that you think is really important? Because you're like the epitome of what everybody should be that comes out of Full Sail. I mean, you did it right, and you took the right path, and you had the right attitude, and you look at your work, and it's just like incredible stuff that you see. And I always tell this all people all the time. I did an interview a couple years ago for a Hall of Famer named Demo, who's a big record producer down in Miami. And I was doing the interview with him. He goes, "I just want everybody to have a jobby." And I was like, okay, I've been around for a while. I've never heard that term before. What's a jobby? He goes, it's a job that's a hobby that you would do even if they didn't pay you for it. I want everybody to work around me like that, and so, I really, that's how I feel, because, we've been blessed. I mean, we're blessed to do this for a living.
Yes.
I wake up every day and go, okay, what cool thing do I get to do today? What cool person do I get to meet? What cool place do I get to go? What cool thing do I get to learn? Because it's a learning experience. So you learn so much about so many different
Oh
random
yeah.
things. Yeah.
And I mean, and there's so many opportunity to get out and explore and travel. And my wife and I got to go to Puerto Rico and the Bahamas, and next month I'm going to the Yukon up in Alaska and doing a show for Discovery Channel. It's like those opportunities are awesome. Not a lot of people get that, especially on somebody else's dime. I'm going to the Yukon on this production company's paying for it for the show. But the one important thing that Christina and I, my wife, she's production manager, is to always stay humble. And like you said, we've been blessed to have been around so many cool people that have taught us so much, and so many great mentors like yourself that have taught us so much. And always remembering that, and remembering where you come from, because you get to a certain point in your career to where, yeah, you might be a big time DP, but you know what? I still go and I help the PAs get the cooler out of the van.
Sure.
Always remember where you come from and how you worked your way up to that point, because more than likely those PAs also want to do that. So talk to them, and be involved with them, and always stay humble, and remember how you worked your way up. I think that's something we always have to remind ourselves, because what I tell people on set. Anytime we have a stressful situation on set, or the day's going long and heavy and everybody just wants to quit and go home, I have to remind myself, and I tell my guys this too. I was like, hey, guess what? My brother-in-law is a nurse on the front lines of COVID. He's
Yeah.
pulling the plug on people. My sister-in-law owns a vet clinic in Charlotte, North Carolina. She's saving pets. I have my brother and sister-in-law that are teachers. They're teaching students.
Yeah.
We're getting paid good money to make TV, man. Like,
Yeah. To do something. But I talk about this all the time, because my wife's been a nurse for 35 years. So I would come home and unload on her, like, this guy did this, and he's such a jerk on the set today. And it's like, she stopped me and she'd go, anybody die on you today? And I was like, well, no. She goes, you have nothing to complain about.
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of puts it all in perspective.
My brother-in-law tells me stories, you know, yeah, I had to pull the plug on this, you know, this young child today or this old lady today. They didn't get to say bye to her family because she was quarantined. And I'm like, man, here I am complaining about going an hour overtime or that I'm going to get paid for, you know, or my day didn't go exactly how I wanted, but you know, we're making TV shows, man. And that's, if you remember that and stay humble and always remember that there's other people out there that are doing much more important jobs.
Yeah, and you've done some great. I mean, you've done Flip or Flop, and you've done Seven Little Johnsons. I love Seven Little Johnsons. You know, I did Little Couples for a couple seasons, and I love those guys. And I know, was Gabe working with you on that show at that time, or?
Gabe was on. He came on my second season of Seven Little Johnsons, and then when I left that show, when we had our first child, he took over as DP on it.
Yeah. So, and what most people don't realize is when you're on a show like that, because you spend so much time with those people, they become like family. You know,
oh yeah,
you really
absolutely.
are, you know, family. I still, you know, I get Christmas cards from the Hogan kids all the time, and you know,
Yeah.
all the shows that I've worked on, people, you know, they're always, you know, my birthdays, I get, you know, birthday wishes from people I worked on shows 20 years ago with that, or like, you know, it's pretty amazing. So it is, and you know, with old age comes wisdom and stuff. And you know, most shows that I'm on where I'm a director now, I have a big staff meeting before it starts, and we kind of set the ground rules for what the set's going to be like. And I talk about, you know, no yelling, treat everybody with respect if we're not, you know, having fun. And I always say to people, you know, you're a crew member. There's a reason they call it a crew. You're not an individual, you're part of a bigger crew. And so you have to think about that. If something needs to be done, you do it. You know, don't say it's not my job. If, you know, something's on the floor, pick it up and throw it away. Don't just walk by it. You know, if somebody needs help, you help them. You know, if you get your department wrapped early and there are people still wrapping, go help those people, you know, and then the next time when they're done early, they'll come and help you. It's a crew. You got to work together. So it's really all about that.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think we're out of time, AJ. And man, give Christina my love and a hug and the kids. And thanks for coming to do this. We really want to have you back on because there's so much to talk about. For me, I really would like to get into to do a workshop with you a little bit more about the minutia of shooting and about composition, because that's what I teach primarily is.
Oh yeah, let's do it, man.
Composition. Yeah. And you know, we've had Schaefer on, we've had Mark Lynch and Melissa Lynch on, we've got Gabe coming up hopefully here in a couple months. So we've tried to start bringing in some really good DPs so that people can understand, you know, what that's like and what the job entails. So again, thanks for coming out. Give my love to everybody, and hopefully we'll see you soon. I'm up in Hilton Head this weekend, you know, but I'm coming up to Atlanta here in probably the next month or so for a workshop I'm doing. So I have to stop in and say hello to you guys while I'm up there.
Awesome. Awesome.
Cool. Anybody else have any questions? Nope. Okay. Well, thanks a lot, AJ, and we'll talk to you soon. And I'll send you a link for this when it gets posted.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys. Good luck.
See you later.